Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
25 years of marriage, and this is what I had to show for it. A custom epoxy table that took me 3 months to build, sitting in my garage workshop while my wife Marta stood in our kitchen doorway, arms crossed, looking at me like I'd just tracked mud across her precious hardwood floors. "Honestly, Evan," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she'd perfected over the years. Part disappointment, part disgust, all condescension. "I'd rather eat off the floor than use this garbage." The table wasn't garbage, far from it. I'd spent weeks selecting the perfect walnut slabs, another month letting the epoxy cure properly, and countless hours hand sanding every surface until it felt like silk. The blue-tinted resin flowed through the natural grain like a frozen river, catching light in ways that made the wood seem alive. But to Marta, it was just another one of my little projects. "I suppose mahogany isn't trendy enough for someone who thinks Pottery Barn represents the cutting edge of design," I muttered, running my hand along the table's edge. "What was that?" "Nothing, dear, just admiring my garbage." She huffed and disappeared back into the house, probably to call her sister Victoria and complain about her husband's pathetic attempts at craftsmanship. I could already hear the conversation in my head. "Can you believe he thought I'd want some homemade table for our anniversary? I swear, sometimes I think he doesn't know me at all." The truth was, I knew her better than she realized. I knew she'd react exactly this way. Part of me had built the table anyway, hoping maybe this time would be different. The other part, the part that was growing stronger each year, had built it as a test. She'd failed spectacularly. I wheeled the table back into my workshop, past the router table and the bandsaw, past the carefully organized rows of chisels and hand planes that Marta called my expensive toys. The workshop was the only space in our house that felt like mine anymore. Everything else had been renovated, redecorated, or refreshed, according to Marta's vision of what a successful couple's home should look like. The workshop still smelled like sawdust and wood stain, still had my grandfather's workbench in the corner, scarred and stained from decades of honest work, still felt like a place where a man could think, and I had plenty to think about these days. Marta's work schedule had become increasingly erratic over the past few months. Late meetings, weekend conferences, urgent client calls that required her to step outside and whisper into her phone. Her marketing firm was supposedly busier than ever, which explained the new clothes, the expensive haircuts, the sudden interest in yoga classes that somehow never seemed to improve her flexibility. I'd been married long enough to recognize the signs, even if I wasn't ready to acknowledge what they meant. My phone buzzed. A text from my buddy Ross. "How'd the anniversary surprise go? She loved the table?" I typed back. "About as much as a vegetarian loves a steakhouse." Ouch. "Want to grab a drink?" Rain check. "Need to finish some things here." What I needed to finish was my growing suspicion that my marriage was becoming as hollow as the space between those walnut slabs before I'd filled it with resin. I spent the next hour organizing my tools, a ritual that usually calmed my mind. Tonight, it just gave me more time to replay the look on Marta's face when she'd dismissed 3 months of my work with a single cutting remark. Not disappointment. That would have suggested she'd expected something better. This was pure disdain, the kind of expression you'd give a persistent salesman or a piece of junk mail. When I finally went back inside, Marta was on the phone in the living room, her voice bright and animated in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "Oh, absolutely," she was saying. "The presentation went perfectly. Jake's ideas really made the difference." Jake Turnbull, her colleague at the marketing firm, 42 years old, drove a BMW, and had the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly challenged by life. I'd met him at a few company parties, where he'd made a point of mentioning his golf handicap, his condo in Portland, and his philosophy about work-life balance. Marta laughed at something he said, a genuine laugh that I realized I hadn't heard in our house for weeks. "I know, right? Some people just don't appreciate quality when they see it." The timing of that comment, so soon after her dismissal of my table, felt like a slap. I stood in the doorway, watching her pace by the window, animated and alive in a way that made me feel like a stranger in my own home. She noticed me watching, and her tone shifted slightly. "Listen, I should go. We'll finish this tomorrow." After she hung up, we stood in our living room, her living room really, since she'd chosen every piece of furniture, every throw pillow, every carefully curated accent piece, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Work call?" I asked. "Just coordinating tomorrow's client meeting." "You know how it is." I did know how it was. I'd been a finance manager for 15 years and I'd never once had a coordination call that made me laugh like a teenager or pace around the room like I was high on life. Jake seems dedicated, I said. He's very professional. I'm sure he is. Marta studied my face, looking for something. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she relaxed slightly. I'm going to bed early, she said. Long day tomorrow. Of course. Sleep well. She paused at the foot of the stairs. Evan, the table, it's not that it's not nice. It's just not really my style. I understand. And I did understand. The table wasn't her style because I wasn't her style. Not anymore. Maybe not for a long time. After she went upstairs, I sat in my chair, the one piece of furniture she hadn't replaced, and thought about 25 years of marriage. About the young woman who'd once loved my ambition and my dry sense of humor. About the successful professional who now saw those same qualities as limitations. About Jake Turnbull and his BMW and his philosophy about work-life balance. About the way my wife's voice changed when she talked to him. I picked up my phone and scrolled through our recent text messages. Mostly logistics, grocery lists, schedule confirmations, reminders about social obligations. When had we stopped saying anything that mattered? 2 weeks later, everything changed. Marta had dragged me to the opening of a new designer showroom downtown. One of those events where people sipped wine and pretended to understand art while networking with other people who also pretended to understand art. I was admiring a display of handcrafted pottery when I heard a familiar voice behind me. This is absolutely stunning, the sales rep was saying. The artist is local, incredibly talented. The way the resin captures the light, it's like the wood is alive. I turned around and felt the ground shift beneath my feet. There, spotlighted in the center of the showroom, was my table. My anniversary table, the piece of garbage that Marta wouldn't allow in our house. The price tag read $15,000. Excuse me, I said to the sales rep, a polished woman in her 30s who radiated the kind of enthusiasm that came from working on commission. Could you tell me about this piece? Oh, you have excellent taste, she gushed. This is from a local artisan, incredibly exclusive. The waiting list for his work is months long. The technique is extraordinary. See how the epoxy resin flows through the natural grain patterns? It takes a master craftsman to achieve this level of integration. I nodded, fighting to keep my expression neutral while my mind raced. The artist's name, I'm sorry, but he prefers to remain anonymous. Very private person, apparently. Works by referral only. Behind me I heard Marta's sharp intake of breath. I turned to find her staring at the table, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been panic. Marta, I said, everything all right? Fine, she managed, just surprised by the price. $15,000 is actually quite reasonable for work of this caliber, the sales rep continued. We had a couple from Boston drive up just to see it last week. I expect it'll sell within the month. Oder Mission. Other people were gathering around the display now, drawn by our conversation. I heard murmurs of appreciation, comments about the craftsmanship, speculation about the mysterious artist. The grain pattern is incredible, someone said. Look how the resin catches the gallery lights. I've never seen anything like it. Marta stood frozen beside me, her wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. The woman who'd called this same table garbage 2 weeks ago was now watching strangers praise it as a masterpiece. We should go, she whispered. Already, but you love gallery events. I have a headache. Perhaps some fresh air will help. I took her arm gently, steering her toward the exit. It was nice talking with you, I told the sales rep. Beautiful piece. Thank you. Here's my card if you'd like to discuss it further. Outside, Marta walked quickly toward our car, her heels clicking on the sidewalk like a countdown timer. Quite a coincidence, I said, matching her pace. What? Finding a table so similar to the one I made. Almost identical, really. She fumbled with her purse, looking for her keys. I didn't notice. Really? Because you looked like you'd seen a ghost in there. Don't be ridiculous. I unlocked the car and we drove home in silence, but my mind was anything but quiet. Someone had taken my table, the table Marta had rejected, and put it in that showroom. Someone who knew its value, who understood the work that had gone into it, someone who had access to my workshop. The next morning, while Marta was at her yoga class, I went out to the garage. The table was gone, of course, but I hadn't expected to find it there. What I found instead were tire tracks in the gravel near the side door, fresh tracks from a vehicle that wasn't mine or Marta's. I spent the morning thinking, organizing the pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to understand. By the time Marta returned from yoga, glowing and energetic in a way that seemed excessive for someone who'd just spent an hour stretching, I had formed a theory. Good class? I asked. Wonderful. Very invigorating. I bet. Hey, I was thinking about that table from last night, the one in the showroom. Her smile faltered slightly. What about it? Just wondering how someone could create something so similar to mine. Same wood, same resin technique, same dimensions. It's almost like they had the original to work from. Artists inspire each other all the time. True, although this seemed more like copying than inspiration. Marta busied herself with making coffee, her movements sharp and efficient. You're reading too much into it. Maybe. Or maybe someone saw my work and decided it was worth more than the person who made it realized. She spilled coffee grounds across the counter. Clumsy of me. Here, let me help. As I cleaned up the spilled grounds, I noticed Marta's phone buzzing on the counter. A text message from Jake Work appeared on the screen. Everything handled. Stop worrying. Work emergency? I asked. She grabbed the phone quickly. Just client stuff. Jake seems to text you a lot for client stuff. He's very thorough. I'm sure he is. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 25 years of marriage. I went through Marta's purse. Not proudly, not with any sense of righteousness, but with the methodical determination of a man who needed to know where he stood. I found the receipt wedged behind her credit cards, printed on expensive paper from Romano's, the Italian place downtown that cost more for dinner than most people spent on groceries in a week. 2 entrees, wine, dessert. The date was from 3 nights ago, when Marta had claimed to be working late. At the bottom, someone had written in pen, J plus M, forever. Forever. That was a bold estimate for dessert. I photographed the receipt and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat in my chair and considered my options. I could confront Marta directly, but that would only lead to denials, excuses, and probably accusations about my paranoia. I could hire a private investigator, but that felt like admitting defeat, or I could handle this myself. That evening, Marta announced she had another late meeting. Big presentation tomorrow, she explained, checking her appearance in the hallway mirror. Jake and I need to go over the final details. Of course you do. She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like a stamp on a document than any expression of affection. Don't wait up. After her car pulled out of the driveway, I made a decision that would change everything. I got in my truck and followed her. Marta didn't go to her office. She drove across town to Hillcrest, the expensive neighborhood where Portland's young professionals bought their starter mansions. She pulled into the driveway of a contemporary house with too many windows and not enough character. Jake Turnbull's house. I'd been there once for a company barbecue, back when I still attended Marta's work functions. I parked down the street and waited. Through the large front windows, I could see 2 figures moving around inside, laughing, touching, doing things that had nothing to do with client presentations or work meetings. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching my wife betray 25 years of marriage, and felt something inside me shift. Not heartbreak. I'd been preparing for that possibility for months. Not rage. That would come later. What I felt was clarity. The woman in that house wasn't the person I'd married. She was someone else entirely. Someone who could dismiss my work as garbage while secretly profiting from it. Someone who could lie to my face while texting her lover. Someone who could throw away our marriage for a man with a BMW and a philosophy about work-life balance. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I drove home, made myself a sandwich, and began planning. If Marta wanted to play games, I'd show her what a real player looked like. If she thought I was just some pathetic husband who'd accept whatever scraps of attention she threw my way, she was about to learn otherwise. The table had been just the beginning. She'd taken something I'd created and turned it into a lie, just like she'd taken our marriage and turned it into a performance. Time to return the favor. I took the next day off work, something I rarely did without weeks of advance planning. Told my boss I had a family emergency that needed immediate attention. Not technically a lie, My family was definitely having an emergency, even if only one of us knew it yet. While Marta was at her real office, handling her legitimate clients, I drove back to Jake's house in Hillcrest. Broad daylight, middle of a weekday, when most people were at work and the neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional landscaping crew or delivery truck. I wasn't planning anything dramatic, nothing that would land me in legal trouble or give Marta ammunition for a divorce proceeding. Just a small reminder that actions have consequences. Jake's BMW sat in the driveway like a monument to his own self-importance. Metallic silver, pristine condition, probably worth more than most people's annual salary. The kind of car that announced its owner's success to everyone within a 2-block radius. I parked around the corner and walked back, carrying a small toolbox and wearing the kind of confidence that came from having a legitimate reason to be somewhere. If anyone asked,
Her name is saved as electrician. You've been calling the electrician at midnight for 4 months.
How stupid do you think I am?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
I was a contractor checking on a neighbor's property. People saw what they expected to see. The BMW's tires were expensive, low-profile things that probably cost more to replace than my truck was worth. It would have been a shame if someone had damaged them. Fortunately, I wasn't planning to damage them, just adjust the air pressure to a more reasonable level, like 0. 4 tires, 4 valve stems, 4 soft hisses as the air escaped. The car settled onto its rims like a deflating balloon, its aggressive stance transformed into something more humble. But I wasn't finished. I'd brought a piece of fish from our freezer, a salmon fillet that had been in there so long it was starting to develop freezer burn. Waste not, want not. I tucked it carefully under the driver's seat, wedged it back where it wouldn't be immediately visible, but where the heating system would help it reach its full aromatic potential. Then I walked back to my truck and drove home, feeling better than I had in months. Marta came home that evening in an unusually good mood, humming as she prepared dinner. I wondered if Jake had mentioned his car trouble, or if she was simply enjoying the thrill of her secret life. "How was work?" I asked. "Productive. We finalized the Henderson account." Jake must be pleased. He seemed satisfied with the outcome. I bet he was. Nothing like a flat tire and the smell of rotting fish to satisfy a man's day. "Any plans for tomorrow?" "Just the usual client meetings." "Why?" "Curious about your schedule. We barely see each other anymore." Marta paused in her chopping, the knife suspended over a pile of vegetables. "That's what happens when careers get demanding." "True, although some demands are more enjoyable than others." She looked at me sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing specific. Just an observation about work satisfaction." We ate dinner in relative quiet, the conversation limited to safe topics like the weather and our kids' college updates. Amelia was doing well in her junior year at UMaine, while Ross Jr. had landed an internship with an engineering firm in Boston. Normal family stuff that felt increasingly surreal given the circumstances. After dinner, Marta's phone rang. Jake's name appeared on the screen, and she answered with the kind of breathless concern usually reserved for family emergencies. "What happened?" she said, stepping into the next room. I could hear fragments of the conversation, something about vandalism, insurance claims, and the inconvenience of finding alternative transportation. Jake sounded frustrated, which was understandable. Having your car disabled in your own driveway would be frustrating for anyone. When Marta returned, she looked troubled. "Everything all right?" I asked. "Jake's having car trouble. Someone vandalized his BMW." "That's terrible. Any idea who would do such a thing?" "Probably just random vandalism. You know how people get jealous of nice things." "Jealousy can be a powerful motivator," I agreed. "Sometimes people strike back when they feel they've been wronged. It's still no excuse for destroying someone else's property." Destroying seems like a strong word. Inconveniencing might be more accurate. Marta studied my face, looking for something. Whatever she saw there didn't seem to satisfy her, because her frown deepened. "I might need to give him a ride tomorrow," she said, "just until he gets the insurance sorted out." Of course, helping colleagues is important. It's just professional courtesy. I understand completely. But I understood more than she realized. I understood that Jake's car trouble was just the beginning. I understood that my wife was lying to my face while planning to spend tomorrow playing chauffeur to her lover. And I understood that I was no longer the passive husband who would accept whatever story she chose to tell. The next morning, I followed them again. Marta picked up Jake at his house, and instead of heading toward their office, they drove to a coffee shop on the other side of town. I watched from across the street as they sat at a corner table, Jake gesticulating angrily while Marta leaned in close, her hand covering his. They looked like what they were, two people sharing secrets, planning their next moves, assuming they were smarter than everyone around them. Jake kept looking around nervously, as if he expected someone to be watching. Smart man. Not smart enough, but smarter than I'd given him credit for. I took photos with my phone, careful to capture their body language, their obvious intimacy, the way Marta touched his arm when she laughed. Evidence for later use. After an hour, they finally drove to their office. I went home and spent the day researching Jake Turnbull's life, with the thoroughness I usually reserved for financial audits. Social media made it easy. Jake was the kind of person who documented his existence in real time, posting photos of his meals, his workouts, his weekend adventures. He was married to a woman named Celia, a dental hygienist who seemed to spend most of her time at yoga retreats and wine tastings. They had no children, 2 cats, and a mortgage on the house in Hillcrest. Jake's LinkedIn profile revealed a career built more on networking than actual achievement. He'd bounced between marketing firms every 2 or 3 years, always moving laterally rather than up, always finding new ponds where he could be a bigger fish. His Instagram showed a man desperate to project success. Expensive restaurants, designer clothes, weekend trips to Boston and New York. The kind of lifestyle that required either significant income or significant credit card debt. Given what I knew about marketing salaries in Maine, I suspected the latter. By evening, I had assembled a comprehensive picture of Jake Turnbull. Insecure, overextended, and probably seeing my wife as either a romantic conquest or a career opportunity. Maybe both. When Marta came home, she seemed distracted. How was work? I asked. Challenging. Jake's still dealing with his car situation. Insurance companies can be difficult. It's not just that. He thinks someone targeted him specifically. Why would he think that? The way it was done. Very precise, very deliberate. Like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like he made an enemy somewhere. Jake's not the type to make enemies. Everyone's the type to make enemies if they push the wrong person too far. Marta looked at me strangely. That's an odd thing to say, just an observation about human nature. Push someone into a corner, and they might surprise you. You're being very philosophical tonight. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About what? About choices, about consequences, about what happens when people take things that don't belong to them. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Marta's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it reflexively. Another text from Jake. More car trouble? I asked. He's just frustrated. I can imagine. Having your routine disrupted can be very unsettling. Yes, it can be. Good thing he has supportive colleagues to help him through difficult times. We all need support sometimes. True, although some support comes with a higher price than others. Marta set down her phone and looked at me directly. Evan, is there something you want to say? Just making conversation. It feels like more than that. Does it? I hadn't noticed. But I had noticed everything. The way she checked her phone constantly. The way she'd started wearing perfume to work. The way she looked at me like I was a problem she needed to solve, rather than a husband she'd chosen to love. I'd noticed, and I was just getting started. The fish worked better than I'd hoped. 3 days later, Jake's BMW was still at the dealership while they tried to locate and eliminate what the service manager described as an organic odor of unknown origin. Jake had rented a car, a sensible sedan, that probably wounded his ego every time he had to drive it. I knew this because I'd started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored, like the fact that Marta now left for work 30 minutes earlier than usual, claiming she needed to stop for coffee, like the way she'd rearranged her schedule to have lunch meetings 3 times a week, like the new underwear I'd noticed in our laundry basket, lacy, expensive things that never seemed to make an appearance at home. My wife was conducting an affair with the methodical precision she brought to her marketing campaigns, and she thought I was too stupid to notice. Time to correct that assumption. I started with something simple, her clothes. Marta had always been particular about her wardrobe, investing in pieces that projected success and sophistication. Her closet was organized like a boutique, with everything arranged by color and season. While she was at work, I carefully selected about half of her designer outfits, the expensive blouses, the tailored jackets, the shoes that cost more than most people's rent, and donated them to the women's shelter downtown. I left a note on her pillow. Minimalism is very trendy this season. Thought you'd appreciate the gesture. The reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. Where are my clothes? Marta demanded when she got home, standing in front of her decimated closet like a general surveying a battlefield. Which clothes? Half my wardrobe is missing. Really? That's strange. Evan, this isn't funny. Those pieces were worth thousands of dollars. Were they? I had no idea you'd invested so heavily in your professional appearance. She spun around to face me, her eyes blazing. What did you do? I helped you embrace a more minimalist lifestyle. Isn't that what all the style magazines recommend these days? You gave away my clothes, donated them to people who might actually appreciate quality craftsmanship. For a moment, I thought she might actually strike me. Her hands clenched into fists, and her face flushed with a rage that was beautiful in its honesty. No pretense, no careful control, just raw fury. You had no right, she whispered. Didn't I? They were just taking up space in our closet, like so many other things in our house that don't get proper appreciation. I want them back. I'm afraid that's not possible. The shelter was very grateful for the donation. Apparently, there's a real need for professional attire among women who are trying to rebuild their lives. Marta stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to process this new version of her husband. The passive man who accepted her dismissals and excuses had apparently developed a backbone. This is about the table, isn't it? She said finally. What table? You know what table? Oh, you mean the piece of garbage that's currently selling for $15,000 at that gallery downtown. No, this isn't about that table at all. Her face went pale. How did you know about the sale? Lucky coincidence. I happened to be in the neighborhood and saw a piece that looked remarkably similar to something I'd made recently. Identical, actually. Same wood, same technique, same dimensions. Almost like someone had taken the original and put it on consignment. Evan, I can explain. Can you? I'd love to hear that explanation, particularly the part about how my garbage became someone else's masterpiece. Marta sank onto the bed, her anger replaced by something that might have been fear. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Jake thought. He has connections in the art world. He said the table was too good to just sit in the garage, so he stole it. He didn't steal it. He was trying to help. Help who? Certainly not me, since I haven't seen a penny from the sale. The money is in an account. We were going to surprise you. I almost laughed. The ease with which she lied was impressive, even after all these years of marriage. What account would that be? Jake handles the business side. I don't have all the details. Of course you don't. Just like you don't have details about your late-night work meetings, or your lunch appointments, or your sudden interest in yoga. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Marta looked at her hands, at the floor, anywhere but at me. How long? I asked. How long what? Don't insult my intelligence any more than you already have. How long have you been having an affair with Jake? Whom? She started to deny it, then seemed to realize the futility. 3 months, since right around the time you started criticizing everything I did. That's not, it's more complicated than that. Is it? Because it seems fairly straightforward to me. You decided our marriage wasn't exciting enough, so you found someone who made you feel young and desirable again. Then you started seeing everything about our life together as an obstacle to your new happiness. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. The question is, what do we do about it? Marta looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes. We could try counseling, work through this together. Could we? That would require honesty, something you seem to have misplaced somewhere between your first lie and your last one. I made a mistake. You made a series of deliberate choices. The mistake was thinking I wouldn't notice. I left her sitting on the bed, surrounded by the remnants of her carefully curated wardrobe, and went downstairs to make dinner. Normal domestic routine in the middle of domestic warfare. My phone rang while I was cooking. Ross, my old friend who'd asked about the anniversary table. Hey, stranger, he said. Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay? Just working through some household issues. Anything I can help with? Not unless you know a good lawyer. There was a pause. That kind of household issue. The expensive kind. Jesus, Evan, I'm sorry. What happened? The usual story. Wife, younger man, creative interpretations of marriage vows. Marta, really? Really? I never would have guessed. She always seemed so together. She is together, just not with me. Ross was quiet for a moment. You want to grab a drink? Talk it through. Rain check. I'm in the middle of something that requires my full attention. Okay, but call me if you need anything. I mean it. After I hung up, I realized that Ross's surprise was probably genuine. Marta had always been careful to maintain appearances, to project the image of a successful, happily married professional, the kind of woman who had her life figured out. But appearances could be deceiving, as I was about to demonstrate. The next morning, I emptied our joint savings account. Not all of it, just my half, plus a little extra for the table that Jake had stolen. I transferred the money into a college fund for our daughter Amelia, with a note explaining that it was an early graduation gift from both her parents. Then I called the gallery where my table was being sold. "I'm calling about the walnut and epoxy table in your current exhibition," I told the sales rep. "Oh, wonderful. Are you interested in purchasing it?" "Actually, I'm the artist who created it." There was a pause. I thought the artist preferred to remain anonymous. I've reconsidered. I'd like to discuss the terms of the consignment agreement." "I'm not sure I understand. The person who brought you that table didn't have authorization to sell it. It was stolen from my workshop." Another pause, longer this time. "That's a very serious accusation." "Yes, it is. I have documentation proving ownership, including photos of the construction process. I also have witnesses who can verify that the piece was made in my workshop. After Privaldi's perms, in Seed Revive Orsmend. I'm empty hides and bring D.